Hello and welcome to the Passenger Seat Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. I'm Becca, and as you can see, we're stationary and hidden away in the garage yet again for this week's podcast. And that's down to some pretty big dramatics that have happened in the last week, and the fact that I am recording this on the Wednesday night before this goes live. Because of everything that's happened. So if you follow me on social media, you know that this week has been a particularly difficult week in classic car ownership for me, and I've got some kind of warnings and things that I think other people should take away from what's happened to me this week, that I hope you and anybody that you know that you can pass this story on to will be able to learn from, because it's the reason that I still have Peggy, and hopefully it can help save your classics as well. So, last Thursday morning, I was about to head off in Peggy on my way to work. As we know, Thursday mornings have been quite difficult for me this start of the year, and unfortunately this Thursday morning was another particularly difficult one. It was very cold, very frosty, and I think that plays a part in what happens, so it's worth bearing in mind that it was very cold. But Peggy was stored in our kind of brick garage at the time, rather than our kind of Clark material garage that's out on the driveway or out on the driveway. So it's certainly not the coldest that she's been this winter when starting. So I go to start her, and she does struggle to start, and this isn't something that I'd previously had problems with last year. In the winter she was usually quite a good starter even in the freezing cold, but it is something that I'd noticed had started being a problem this winter, and she did struggle to start. As she's warming up, I try to pull her out of the garage so that I can leave her warming up on the driveway, and close the garage up and kind of get ready to head off. And we're about halfway out of the garage when she does a huge backfire and stalls. I go to kind of see what's happening, and notice that there's smoke. Well, what I think is steam actually, to start with, because it's so cold. Any kind of warm air is obviously going to look like steam or dragon's breath or whatever you kind of refer to it as, coming out of the top of Peggy's bonnet. And when I open my door and I smell it, I realise it's not steam, it's not kind of warm breath, it's smoke, and something's on fire. And so I reach behind my driver's seat, grab my fire extinguisher, and open the bonnet to find that her air filter has caught fire, and put it out as quickly as I possibly can. The fact, and this is the really important part that I want everyone to kind of take away from this and to share with people. The fact that I had a fire extinguisher in my car is a relatively new thing. I've had Peggy for, well, it's coming up to 3 years now, and I bought a fire extinguisher over summer because I saw somebody else post that their car had caught fire. I think it was some dripping from a carburettor that had caught fire in their engine bay in a pub car park when they'd gone to start it after a Sunday lunch, and it was the fire extinguishers that the pub had that managed to save their car. And as a result of that, they were now carrying around a fire extinguisher in their car, and I thought that seems like a really sensible thing to do. I probably should have been doing that before now, and I'm definitely going to get one as soon as possible and carry it around in Peggy. And obviously, air filter was on fire. The fact that I had that fire extinguisher, smelt the smoke, grabbed the fire extinguisher, opened the bonnet, and was able to put the fire out pretty much immediately is a huge thing in terms of what damage was done and what the fact I even have a car still, to be honest, because I put it out, and I'll be honest with you, it was absolutely terrifying. It was, you never want to open the bonnet to one of your favourite things in the world and see flames coming out of part of it. I mean, unless you've somehow engineered or designed it to do that, it's not a nice thing to see. And I'm lucky that kind of I had the fire extinguisher. I was able to operate it. When I got the fire extinguisher, I remember spending some time trying to work out how to use it, so that when it came to, if I ever had to use it, I would know what to do. And even so, in that moment, there was a brief moment of panic where when I pulled the thing out and tried to work out how. So this is the fire extinguisher, if you're watching on YouTube, that I used. And so it had like a little pin in the top bit here. And so when I pulled it out, it took me a minute to kind of remember which way it should be facing, and nearly kind of sprayed myself with the powder rather than the car. But I got there and I managed to get it out. And if I hadn't had a fire extinguisher, I mean, she's part way out of a garage that's got quite a bit of oil in it. So if something else had kind of caught and a lot more of her had gone up, I dread to think kind of how much damage would have been done to her and to potentially my garage. My garage has got wooden doors that she was right next to, so there's that as well. Yeah, it's kind of, yeah, I've tried not to dwell too much on the thought of what would have happened if I hadn't had a fire extinguisher. I'd have probably had to kind of seek out water or something to kind of put the fire out, and that's never the best plan. It's always better to be equipped with something that is designed for it, and that's exactly what I'd bought in the summer. I'd bought myself a powder fire extinguisher that was designed for petrol and any kind of accelerants like that, but also electrical fires, which is kind of primarily what you are going to come across in a classic car. This one also came with like a little thing that you can holster your, like you can screw it into stuff. I never did that. I figured it'd be much easier to grab the whole thing, and so it just sat under the driver's seat, because my seat is always going to be empty if I'm jumping out to deal with whatever the problem was. And yeah, so I put the air filter out, and then I think I got quite shaky and panicky, and I was so lucky that my partner Jamie was still here, so I was able to go, okay, my car was just on fire, help, because I kind of froze up a little bit then, and had a realisation of what I'd just seen and what had happened. And on initial kind of look, seemed like it was just the air filter that was damaged, so that was really good news. The air filter that I had on was a Ram air filter. There's been some people that suggested that probably would have gone up faster because it's not as contained as some other air filters. I have gone for a different air filter this time, not because of that, because of the fact that it was cheaper. I'd obviously put out a lot of money in summer for the Ram Air one, and so I've gone for a pancake one because it seems to work reasonably well, and on other people's cars that I know, and was kind of a bit cheaper considering that it's January, and I didn't want to fork out for another air filter when we didn't know what the problem was, and it could possibly go up in flames again, which is a horrible thing to think of, but I was yeah, that's what I've gone for in the replacement. But yeah, the initial look, the air filter was all that had been damaged. The engine bay was somewhat coated in the blue powder that had come out of the fire extinguisher. But other than that, yeah, minimal damage. And but I didn't drive her or do anything with her, obviously, because we didn't know what had caused it. So we essentially pushed her back in the garage. I went to work in our Kia, which Jamie had been planning on going to work in, and he got Wyvern out because it was so cold, it wasn't raining, so he was able to use Wyvern and just wrap up warmly. So we went off to work, and I called my dad and said my car was on fire this morning, and he said, okay, I'll come over and I'll see if I can see what damage or whatever, what parts we might need to order, and try and clear off some of the stuff, because I obviously had to go to work, and he was able to come over and have a look. So it was a really nerve-wracking day waiting for him to get back to me, and to be fair, it was quite quick, and I knew kind of what was what by lunchtime, but it was a little bit nerve-wracking waiting to see kind of how much damage there really was, because you don't really know until you've dug down a little bit further what there possibly could be wrong. Obviously on the surface it was the air filter. We didn't know what had caused the backfire, and all this sort of stuff. So Dad comes round, takes off the remains of the old air filter and takes off the carburettor, and he checks the spark plug gaps and the points in the distributor, and all of those are slightly off, and the timing I think was okay, but these were things that we believed had been set up when some work had been done previously. So we foolishly, probably on my part, hadn't checked them ourselves. We believed they'd been kind of all set up, and so there wasn't anything to worry about. And it was like I'd had one or two black fires when it was cold, when she was starting, and when she was warmed up there wasn't a problem. They were only small backfires. This one really you felt the backfire. It was big, and she was obviously very cold when it happened. But yeah, so he took everything off, checked those things, and also used an air compressor to kind of blow away the most of the blue powder, because it can be quite corrosive from what people have said if it's left to sit there for too long. And then when I got home, I was able to kind of clean off the rest of it, now that kind of things in the burnt stuff was all out of the way. So we believe that the backfire was caused by the spark plugs and the distributor and all that just resulting in her not running correctly and to the best of her ability. These A series engines are so bomb proof that they will run even if all of these things are slightly out, and so it wasn't as noticeable until it was an engine under struggle because of the cold. So Dad took the carburettor away, cleaned out any powder and stuff that had got into it, purely just because I had to carry on with work and stuff like that, and he wanted to kind of check it for damage and things like that. Luckily there was no damage, so he was able to kind of clean that up, put it back together, and then that got fitted back to the car on Friday. We didn't have it run on Friday, and it ran really nicely, started really well, so that was really good. We didn't set the carb up then because it's better to set carbs up when they're warm, so we kind of left it as that, and it was a case of once I'd got an air filter delivered and fitted, I could take the car round to theirs, warm it up, and then Dad's got colour tune and stuff over there, so we could use that to tune the carburettor and things up there. So the air filter arrived over the weekend, and it's pancake air filter, If you're familiar with those, it's kind of two metal bits with a foam in, so it's kind of easier for the carburettor to get air in than the original one. And also an original one, whilst there was one fitted to Peggy when I got her, it was kind of bodged on, so it didn't really fit properly. So got this pancake one that's designed for the HS4 carb that I have, and was then able to take her over on Monday night to my parents' house to tune up the carb and get everything running really well. I then drove her home, so this is 4 days after her being on fire and flames coming out from the bonnet. I was driving her back home, all tuned up and set up. I then went to use her Tuesday morning to take her to work, and there was this weird loss of power that I kept experiencing with her, and it was quite difficult to drive, and it resulted in me kind of flicking between the third and fourth to keep the revs up. But I got her to work, tweaked the carb a little bit there, and thought that maybe she was like not getting enough fuel, but also she had an inline fuel filter, so there was a potential that there was something that just kept getting stuck in the kind of flow of that and issuing a problem. But either way, it was not. The drive home on Monday night had been one of the best drives that I'd had in Peggy in a long time, whilst I hadn't really noticed that things weren't great when I was running her before. I noticed then that she was really good, and to then wake up Tuesday morning and have a car that was losing power and it didn't make any sense. It was, and nothing had been done overnight. I don't know. We got her to work, and then it was decided that I would get her back to my parents after work, and unfortunately it meant that I missed the Peterborough branch meet on the Tuesday night, which I'd really hoped to get to with her, but we got her to my parents' house, and Dad had her all of today trying to work out where this issue was coming from, retuning the carb, and yeah, we think that maybe some bad fuel was getting in, so it wasn't really related to everything that had happened last week. If you've got any ideas, or if you think that the bad fuel thing sounds about right, by all means let me know in the comments. But again, drove her home tonight, touch wood, everything ran really well again, and it was a fantastic drive. There's obviously a few other bits that she needs, because that's classic car ownership, but my goodness, it was a trying week this week in terms of kind of having highs and lows of the fire, then the fixing it at the fire, and then the damage not being so bad, and then fixing it, and then thinking we've got her running really well, and then Tuesday was just a really difficult day in terms of not understanding what had gone wrong, because I think a big thing about classic car ownership is it's sold that when anything does go wrong, it's really easy to fix, and you can work it out. And obviously it probably is much simpler than a modern car, but that doesn't mean that it's always straightforward and really easy to work out. We got there, we've got her back home, but I really wanted to get this podcast out to you guys this week for the pure message of get yourself a fire extinguisher for your car. Be that a modern car, be that a classic car. Yeah, a car in today's life is so useful and important and things like that. And I have no doubt that not only did the fire extinguisher save my car in terms of there not being a lot more things that caught on fire, and it not reaching the fuel lines that were over to the side or anything like that and getting worse, but also meaning that I've got her back and being able to use her so soon after it happened. I'm really hopeful for tomorrow's drive to work, and that everything is going to continue to work well. It's very difficult when you've had a tricky week like this to stay positive, especially when you've had such reliability from your classic car for so long, and then things start happening that you don't understand and you can't work out why they're happening. But I'm hoping that tomorrow is going to be better, and I have already replaced my fire extinguishers and also bought more. We've obviously got one in Wyvern, but also we've put one in our modern car, and then kind of got a spare one that we can use around the house and things like that. But yeah, the main takeaway message that I want you and anyone that you know to take away from what happened is to get a fire extinguisher and have it in an accessible place. Don't hide it away in the boot. Don't tuck it away somewhere where you're not going to be able to get to it quickly and easily, because it's going to be, time is of the essence if and when it happens, and you're going to need to be able to get it and use it. And like I did, spend some time making sure you know what to do with it should anything happen. That's not necessarily going to be at the forefront of your mind when it does happen, but it might help you be those couple of seconds faster in terms of getting your car safe and under control again. So yeah, that's been my week in classic car ownership. I hope you've had a better week. I know that the frosts and the salt on the roads and things have all been very challenging for getting classic cars out, but I'm hoping that the weather is on the turn now and it's going to start warming up and we can start enjoying our cars even more. It's been really lovely to see a few out regardless this week, and obviously Wyvern's been pulled into service and I'm sure been making a few people smile. It was his registration day on Monday, and it always makes me laugh that a convertible car was bought in January and registered then. So Jamie got to use that this week, and I'm sure Wyvern's been very thrilled about it. But thank you ever so much for listening. I hope it's been interesting to hear what happened, and you get the takeaway from this loud and clear about how to keep your classic cars as safe as possible when you're out using them, or even on the driveway in my case. And in the meantime, drive safely and happy motoring.